أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful, we ask Allah to send His greatest peace and blessings upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. We praise Allah for this blessing and every blessing, for without Allah, we would have nothing. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters. Today, inshallah, in continuing our conversation on the virtuous community or the vision of a virtuous community, we're going to be delving into an area that is very special. And this area, inshallah, brothers and sisters, is going to be one where we're going to be addressing a few very important questions. Of those questions include, what was the first commandment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And furthermore, what happens when hadith and Quran contradict one another? Why was the writing of narration so important to the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and the Imams? What were referred to as the 400 and what were the 4? And what did the Imams specifically teach? As in, what were the sciences that their students would learn during their era, especially when it came to the 5th and 6th and 7th Imams, Imam al-Baqir, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, and Imam al-Kadhim, alayhi salam. Inshallah, we're going to delve right into this. And similar to yesterday, I'm going to be showing some slides as we're discussing this for us to follow along with some of the narrations that we're referring to and see how some of these concepts come together. Again, as we address in these questions, the focus being here on moving from divine guidance and what we've discussed in the past few days and entering more specifically into what was the emphasis that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had through education, narration, and keeping the integrity of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ and the teachings of Islam all together? How does the education and the narration come together with the companions of the Imams and what they emphasized through their writing? What did they learn from the Imams? And how was that encapsulated not just merely in individuals, but that would actually move further into generations through their writings and through their works, their scholarly books? Let's jump right into it, inshallah. When it comes to the doctrine of education in Islam, it's important to realize that the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, from the very beginning, emphasized education in all aspects. Look at the narration, for example, where he says, "Utlub al-ilma walau fi as-sin." Go and seek knowledge, seek an education, even if you have to go all the way to China. That emphasis of seeking an education and seeking knowledge and praising those who are ones who have committed themselves to a lifestyle of knowledge seeking was something that was from the Prophet and from the rest of the Imams alayhim salam. In fact, this would come in divine revelation. In answering that first question that we mentioned, what was the first commandment that God gave our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It was in chapter 96 of the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, "Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq." Read in the name of your Lord who created. The very first commandment that God gives our Prophet is not pray, is not fast, is not worship me. It's not any of those things, but rather read. Going to tell us that the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave through the Archangel Gabriel was read. Stemming from this idea of the significance and the importance of education, where our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself and throughout all of the Imams and all of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they would emphasize reading writing, research, dialogue, engaging with one another. There's a beautiful hadith where Imam Ali alayhi salam, he speaks to some of his companions, emphasizing the practice of knowledge. And he says, أيها الناس اعلموا أن كمال الدين طلب العلم والعمل به. O people, know that the perfection of religion is in seeking knowledge and acting according to it. In another hadith, Imam Ali alayhi salam would say, طلب العلم فريضة, that the seeking of knowledge is an obligation. And furthermore, ألا إن الله يحب بغاة العلم. Indeed, Allah loves the seeker of knowledge. Notice the connection between all of these things, the emphasis on seeking knowledge, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who seek knowledge, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first commandment He would give to our Holy Prophet would be to seek knowledge. And there are a number of other narrations like this following one from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi himself, where he would say, تذاكروا وتلاقوا وتحدثوا. Discuss, meet, and narrate our traditions. As narration of our traditions is a cleanser of the heart, surely hearts rust as swords rust, and their cleanser is narration. Just as a small tip for all of us, directly coming from the Holy Prophet ﷺ, in the holy month of Ramadan and outside of the holy month of Ramadan, let it be a habit for us to gather with one another. Let it be for us to come together, and even if it's merely mentioning one narration or a few narrations, having the mention of the Holy Prophet and his family and their traditions in our discussions, in our gatherings, can be that thing that is going to lighten up our path and give us that rejuvenation that we need for our heart, mind, and soul. When we're coming together, let it be a habit for us that we mention the Prophet in our discussions, that we mention Ahlul Bayt in our discussions, and we speak about them. The more we speak about them, the more we're allowing them to actually come into our lives. Now, another important thing to realize is something that we tend to do maybe unknowingly. And that is when we look at the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, though we look at the Holy Quran and we wish to seek guidance from it, at times we look at the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we try to interpret things in our own way. And we try to implement things in our lives in a way that is more befitting of our own whim, our own desires. And I wanted to stop here and look at another narration of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, where he goes and he speaks about interpreting verses from the Holy Quran. He says, من فسر برأيه من فسر آية من كتاب الله فقد كفر. And there's parentheses here in interpreting the hadith into saying that whoever interprets a single verse of the Quran, of the book of God, by his opinion alone has disbelieved. And here we're looking at this idea that the book of God is so sacred, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us guardians of that book, sent us the Holy Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam to show us the way in the verses of the Holy Quran that may be clear or may not be clear. They show us the way as in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us here, especially in those that may be vague or ambiguous. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us Ahlul Bayt and gave us the Prophet so that we know how do you take the Quran and implement it in your life. Imam Ali alayhi salam was known to have referred to as Al-Quran al-Natiq, the speaking or walking Quran, as in he implemented what was given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his word. It's important for us not to be hasty or to be risk takers when it comes to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it makes it more convenient for us. And that's the thing, when it comes to our religion, when it comes to our faith, having it as a mere convenience should give us a red flag in our own minds. If we're doing things out of convenience rather than a commitment to a belief, that's something that we really need to take a step back and see, why am I doing this to begin with? Whether it be the things that we're doing during the day while we're fasting, or it be outside of the holy month of Ramadan and the way we interact with our religion, trying to find answers from scholars or from books that fit our own paradigm and our own worldview. Trying to look at the verses of the Holy Quran and say, oh, I like this verse, or I like this narration. Why? Why do you like this narration, or why do you like this verse? Because it fits a worldview that I already came to the religion with. That instead of looking and trying to perfect my worldview in a way that the verses of the Holy Quran and the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam tell me, instead I'm trying to fit the religion in a paradigm that I want to shape for myself based on my own personal opinion and my own personal experience. That's something that we can actually end up doing without even realizing, and it can really take us down a really slippery and dangerous slope, because then you're the one who is dictating and saying, well, this is what this verse means, and this is what this hadith means, and this is what the Prophet intended, and this is what the Prophet wanted from me, rather than actually seeking it from those who actually know, seeking it from the scholars, and ultimately from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and from the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, when it comes to the Quran itself, on this subject, it's important to realize how important hadith is when it comes to the Holy Quran and it being hand in hand with the Quran. Of course, the hadith that we're looking at is the one that's narrated from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, from their companions, from Ahlul Bayt, and to the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The hadith and the Quran go hand in hand, because not everything is explained in the Holy Quran. Not everything is given in the Holy Quran. Like we mentioned yesterday in the narration of Al-Thaqalain, where the Prophet emphasizes that I am leaving with you. Inni tarikum fikum al-thaqalain, kitabullah wa atrati. I'm leaving with you the book of God and my family. In some narrations, sunnati, my tradition. And even with that, we mentioned, even if it is that, there's still the emphasis that in order to understand the tradition of the Holy Prophet, you would have to go back to the individuals that were closest to him and most knowledgeable and most scholarly, and the ones that he pointed us to in order for us to understand what his sunnah, what his tradition, what his actions were to begin with. Now, when you're taking the hadith and the Quran together, it's important to realize that throughout history, there were people that narrated from all different parts. And there were some narrations that were fabricated. So what is the guidance from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam when it comes to this second question that we mentioned, being what if hadith and Quran contradict? What do we do with that when they contradict? Well, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam tells us, كل شيء مردود إلى كتاب الله والسنة وكل حديث لا يوافق كتاب الله فهو زخرف. Which basically means everything goes back to the book of God and the tradition of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Any tradition that does not concur with the book of God is a false tradition. This is something that we don't take. So basically, if you're seeing a hadith that contradicts with any aspect of the Holy Quran and the teachings of the Quran, it's not accepted. This is point blank by our Imams and what they're telling us. Another narration, he says, whatever of our narrations that reach you and that are not corroborated by the book of God, simply void. فَهُوَ بَاطِل. The Imam is emphasizing here that we're not going to, as the Imams, as the safeguard, that safety mechanism of the Holy Prophet and his tradition, we're not going to be adding anything to that, nor we're going to be putting anything that is different from it. And it's important for us to realize this. Why? Because when people do see narrations that are fabricated, whether they're fabricated by people from whatever time period that they came from, whether it was close to the time of the Prophet or much later, and looking at those specific narrations, one should be able to have the first safety mechanism there is looking at this hadith by the Imam saying, listen, if it's going to contradict the Quran, then we don't accept it. We don't have anything in our doctrine and our belief that is contradicting of the Holy Quran. Furthermore, when it comes to this next question of why did the Imams emphasize the writing of these ahadith throughout their time? The Imams, when they were teaching their companions, and this started actually with the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, there was unfortunately a movement at the lifetime of the Prophet and soon after his passing of certain people that did not want the narrations of the Prophet to continue. Instead, they believed in their minds that having the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reign supreme as the sole source of guidance for people of the time and the people that would come later is something that we needed to contain, something that we needed to keep and maintain for the sake of the religion. This is a narration that's coming from a conversation with the first caliph, and that he says to some of the people in his midst, he says, you're narrating narrations that you differ on, and people after you will differ even more. So don't narrate anything. Tell the people that we differ on what will be cared for the book of God. Tell the people that we differ and that this will be cared for by the book of God. What it permits you, permit, and what it prohibits you, prohibit. So basically, put away the narrations. Let's not speak of the narrations. Stop narrating, stop writing. And what the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us is enough. And another incident during the lifetime of the Prophet as well, there would be one of the individuals, his name was Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. So Abdullah would tell the Prophet that he was being stopped from writing down the narrations by some of the people, and that anything that he would see the Prophet doing or saying, he would write it down. And some people were telling him, hey, stop writing. We don't want any additions to what we have with the book of God. And the Holy Prophet would emphasize to him, no, you keep writing. And whatever you see me doing, keep writing. In another incident, there would be the case where at the deathbed of the Holy Prophet, the Prophet would look to the people around him, and he was being visited by a number of companions, a number of believers, a number of Muslims. And one of the individuals that was present was observing the Prophet and what he was saying. The Prophet said, I want to share with you some of my last wills, some of my last advices for you. Please give me some paper and a pen. Give me something to write on and give me something to write with. And one of the individuals that was present would go on to say that the man is hallucinating, leave him be. The Prophet would be so upset by what he was saying, accusing him of hallucinating, that he would actually tell them to leave. And the second part of what he said, other than hallucinating, was he's hallucinating, leave him be, hasbuna kitabullah, enough for us is the book of God. Basically, we don't need any more advice. We don't need any more additional guidance when it comes to the faith. The Prophet would be angered with these individuals and would tell them to leave, and only his closest family members would stay. So all of this coming to what? Historically, we would see, as mentioned by the same sources of these narrations that we've just mentioned, what would happen is with the first caliphs, they would actually order for the burning of many of these already documented narrations from the Holy Prophet. And again, it was coming from this doctrine that they wanted to establish, which was, we just want the book of God to be the sole authoritative word for religious guidance for people. We do not want narrations. We do not want the tradition of the Prophet given to the people, written by these narrators. So a lot of the narrations were actually gathered by state order, and then they were burned. And some narrations say that it took actually a month to bring all of these narrations together and have them burnt. And this took place at the beginning of the second caliphate. The Imams, in being ones who were citizens of the state and were civilians, were not in a position of authority, were not at the helm, in order to safeguard the religion, they themselves would emphasize amongst their family and their companions the continuation of writing the narrations. This would be from Imam Ali alayhi salam all the way to Imam al-Sadiq, Imam al-Kadhim, and all the Imams after them. So we're going to be taking a closer look, inshallah, when it comes to these narrations that were compiled as not just merely a reaction to all of the narrations that were burned in the early days of the first caliphs, but also as an emphasis on what the Prophet would have as a doctrine of education, a doctrine of religious learning, a doctrine of making sure that you would bring yourself closer to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by narrating what the Prophet had spoken about and did. There is a compilation of narrations that were brought together by some of the companions of our 6th and 7th Imams, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam and Imam Musa al-Kadhim. And what these companions did was they brought a collection of these narrations by the Imams, and they formed what would become known as the 400, al-Usul al-Arba'mi'ah. Al-Usul al-Arba'mi'ah would be what many of the scholars that would later on in the 9th and 10th century would come to form their own books that would become very authoritative books that to this day we still look at for reference in narration, as in and come to be al-Kutub al-Arba'a. So the scholars that wrote al-Kutub al-Arba'a, they would base them primarily on al-Usul al-Arba'mi'ah, the 400. Al-Kutub al-Arba'a is what we mentioned in the beginning, the question of what is the 4? The 4 is these 4 books. These 4 books are some of the books that I would encourage all of us, if it's the first time we're hearing them, let's take a second to really try to get them to the forefront of our minds and be ones that we know for ourselves. Because when we're looking at our narrations and what our scholars refer to for narrations, which is the basis of our understanding of what our Islamic laws are, the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and the verses of the Holy Quran first and foremost, you're looking at these 4 books. Kitab al-Kafi, which was by Shaykh al-Kulayni, who was a 10th century scholar. You're looking at Man La Yahdaruhu al-Faqih by Shaykh al-Saduq, Tahdib al-Ahkam by Shaykh al-Tusi, and then the 4th one, Al-Istibsar, which was also by Shaykh al-Tusi, and this was made as a summary and a refinement of his previous work, Tahdib al-Ahkam. Now, each one of these books, some of them have upwards of 16,000 narrations like Kitab al-Kafi. Al-Istibsar, for example, has about 6,000 or 7,000 narrations, and that's, like we said, an abbreviation or a summary that was done as a request from people of the time that wanted to have a more refined approach to the work of Shaykh al-Tusi, who passed away in the 11th century, 1067 AD. Now, when you're looking at these 4 books and the scholars that wrote these books, they come from a heritage of scholars before them. And the heritage of scholars that came before them were the companions of the Imams. Now, the companions of the Imams were ones who grew up with the Imams, studied with them, and had a lifestyle that was emulating the work of the Imams themselves. The Imams didn't just have anybody that was accompanying them and working with them and spending time with them. These were the cream of the crop. These were some of the best people of their time. Some of the most notable narrators and contemporaries of Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq, are 5th and 6th Imams, would be the following individuals: Burayd ibn Muawiyah al-Ajli, Abu Basir al-Rawi, Muhammad ibn Muslim, Zurara ibn A'yun, Aban ibn Taghlib, Ubaydullah ibn Ali al-Halabi. These individuals were respected across the board, and the Imam spent a lot of time with them. You'll see that in those 4 books that we just mentioned, in Al-Kafi and Man La Yahdaruhu al-Faqih and Al-Istibsar, you'll see that in these books, these are the individuals who are narrating from the Imams. So when you're hearing a hadith from Abu Abdullah, Imam Ja'far alayhi salam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, this is usually going to be narrated by one of these individuals. At the same time, these individuals, what's so beautiful about them is that they were not just ones who were students of the Imams in narration, in the science in the narration itself, but rather they were ones who studied theology with the Imam. They studied jurisprudence with the Imam. They studied Quranic exegesis or tafsir, interpretation of the Holy Quran. For example, Hisham ibn al-Hakam was known as a scholar of theology of that time. Zurara was known to be a scholar of jurisprudence, of fiqh. Aban ibn Taghlib was known for his tafsir of the Quran and understanding the verses of the Holy Quran at a great depth. Another one of the companions, Lut ibn Yahya, he was known for being one of the greatest historians of his time. And actually, he came from a line, a progeny of historians, his grandfather being a companion of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and would be one who would actually fall as a martyr in the battle of Ma'rakat al-Jamal, the battle of the camel, with Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam during his lifetime. Another companion who many may know him as the father of early chemistry was Jabir ibn Hayyan. And Jabir was not just a chemist and one who founded early chemistry, but he was a physician, he was a physicist, and he was an astronomer, amongst many other things. Jabir was one of the students of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And these are just to mention a few of the Imam's companions and their students. What's so amazing is that though they studied in so many different areas, the emphasis was on the preservation of religion and preservation of the faith. The emphasis was, how do we make sure that we continue to be ones who would safeguard against those who wish to take away from the sanctity of Islam and narrate things that would be made up, that would come up with a bunch of false accusations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, of the history of Ahlul Bayt, of the history of the Prophet, the things that he did, the things that he didn't do. And instead, these individuals would make sure, with all of the knowledge that they gained and all of the studies that they had, they would commit themselves to a lifestyle of seeking knowledge and making sure that what they did, what they shared with their families and their friends, what they shared with their community, was truly, purely from the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. They committed themselves to a lifelong journey of learning and education. Now, it didn't stop at the narrations. Like we mentioned from the very beginning, when it came to all of these quests that the Imams and the companions of the Imams had, it came to preserving the integrity of Islam, the beliefs, the teachings, through the narrations, through the education, and through even supplication. One of the most notable works in Islamic history is As-Sahifa Sajadiyya by Imam Sajjad, Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam. This Imam who survived the tragedy of Ashura as the heir of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the one who the Imam would emphasize so much to Lady Zainab, to the members of Ahlul Bayt that were present, that Imam Sajjad needs to be protected, and that he would be, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, he would be sick in the land of Karbala, would not be able to participate in the battle, and by Allah's will, he would be one who would survive. Though all of the men and many of, and even some of the women and the children were tortured and abused, and some of them killed and died, that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam would survive all of that. As-Sahifa Sajadiyya is a compilation of his supplications, his psalms, his even whispers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the munajat al-khamsta ashar that would come, the 15 whispers of the Imam, where he would, through different states, different emotions, that he would have, describing what a believer could have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's a state of fear, a state of repentance, a state of regret. The Imam takes us through all of these emotions and all of these states of mind and how to converse with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, the education of Ahlul Bayt, though it came definitely through the narrations and through preserving what the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam spoke of from the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, as in the way we should conduct ourselves, the way we should live, the way we should think, the way we should believe. A lot of this was also encapsulated through the words of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, also through the words of his forefathers, his father Imam al-Hussein, his father Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, whether it was through Imam al-Hussein in the dua of Arafah. That is a beautiful, beautiful dua where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam has this amazing conversation with God and showing us how to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam in the dua that he taught Kumail ibn Ziyad, and which would become known as Dua Kumail ibn Ziyad. This is a dua that many of us may recite every Thursday night, every Eve of Friday. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the blessing of these imams so that He shows us, listen, look at this example of the way they speak to me. Speak to me the way that they speak to me. This is in order for you to get your feeling, your emotion, your intent, your state of mind in aligned with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, then speak to me as they speak to me, because they know me the most. Imam Zain al-Abidin in the Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya, this is known to be one of the oldest prayer manuals in Islam. It's considered to be the formative book on spirituality from early Islamic history. And it came at such a telling time right after the tragedy of Karbala, in which this Imam would focus on the spiritual rejuvenation of the Ummah, a spiritual renaissance after the death of his father. And the death of his father, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, would be coming at the same time of the death of the conscience of the people of the time. Why? Because they had the audacity to kill Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the way that they did. And some would have the audacity to just stand idly by. And some would even have the audacity to celebrate it. The reason for that has a lot to do with the history and the propaganda that came from the Umayyad dynasty that started with Muawiyah and continued with Yazid and the rest of the Umayyads for about 90 years. A dynasty that would wish to change the integrity of Islam and create a fabricated one that would suit their own desires and their own whims. Again, whether it be interpretation of the Holy Quran, fabricating hadith with pseudo scholars, and using people just to make sure that they got their way. Take that with you today and see how can you and I relate, and be very practical with this. Of course, we're not comparing ourselves, whether it be on the great scale of using ourselves in comparison to the companions of the Imam and saying we're like Zurara by protecting the narrations and by safeguarding it and by narrating it, etc., etc. Inshallah, we can aspire to be like that and aspire to be like the Imams. And we're not saying we're on the path of their enemies, but what we're saying here is take a moment of reflection and see when history, as we mentioned yesterday, the movement of the Imams was one. When you look at history and you see the individuals that took one path versus the other, where are we finding ourselves today in the sense of, are we emulating the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, or are we emulating the path of those who didn't want to take the path of Ahlul Bayt and instead wanted to do their own thing, wanted to take their own path, and wanted to make sure that, you know what, let me utilize the book of God and whatever is remaining of the tradition, be it me scrapping from the tradition itself or formulating certain things that I like the way it sounds. Oh, that's a really nice hadith, or that's a really nice verse. Let me share this. Let me post this. Why? Because it fits me. It fits my lens, my paradigm, my worldview. What if we were to look at a verse or a hadith that might not necessarily, but you know in your wisdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word, that Allah's word is the greatest, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and what they have shared with us is what we have to hold on to for the preservation of our faith. And the importance here, when we're looking at the preservation of our faith and us committing to that, the preservation of the faith is our salvation. Because without the faith, we would be misguided. And without the faith, we would not know how to direct ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that He wants us to direct ourselves to Him. Now, with all of this, brothers and sisters, let's try to understand that you and I belong to this heritage. You and I belong to this preservation of the faith through the companions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, through their works, through emphasizing the importance of the doctrine of education in our faith, education through narration, education through supplication, education through giving an importance to the words of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, sharing them in our gatherings, sharing them with our children, whether it be a hadith a day, a hadith a week, making sure our gatherings, we may be sitting together as a family and we want to enjoy our company. Bless it with what they said. Bless it with what they shared with one another. Let us bring ourselves closer to what we've discussed in practice and bring Iman into our hearts and let Islam truly settle in our mind, heart, and soul in order for us to elevate from Islam into Iman, in order for us to enter Masjid al-Haram so that we enter the Kaaba. And once we've entered the Kaaba, we know we're there. We're there. So brothers and sisters, inshallah, with all of this that has been said and done, let us take a practical step to Sahif al-Sajadiyah. Sahif al-Sajadiyah, take one of these supplications of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. For example, Dua Abi Hamza. Dua Abi Hamza is one of those supplications from the Imam that is emphasized in these nights and is greatly recommended for us to supplicate in the nights of Shahr Ramadan. Take it. If the whole entire dua is daunting, then take it piece by piece. I tell you, the first time that I listened to this dua changed my life. Not by listening to it once, but because the first time I listened to it, I fell in love with it. It took me through all the different emotions that I could have in my life and how to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's one of the most beautiful things about, especially when it comes to Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. He gave these supplications at a time where people's spiritual consciousness was dead. And he reawakened them. Let us reawaken ourselves through these supplications. Let us go back to Al-Kutub al-Arba'a. Let us go back to Al-Kafi and open it up and see, what narration can I benefit from? What narration could I remove the rust from my soul? As Imam Ali alayhi salam and as the Prophet would say, remove the rust of the soul of mine like the sword, cleansing that rust away through the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Inshallah, brothers and sisters, in all of these discussions that we have, the key here is not just listening and gaining, but taking a step further and implementing what we can do. There's a lot of practical steps with this. And as a request, I wanted to end with this as a request from all of the brothers and sisters that are behind the scenes, making these lectures happen, making all of these things possible for us while we're quarantined, while we're trying to stay safe at home. If you have pictures of you and your family that you would like to share so that more brothers and sisters can be encouraged to get on the live streams and benefit from these lectures. There are numerous lectures that are being streamed every single day. There's kids programs that are being streamed every single day. Dua al-Iftitah being recited. The chapters of the Holy Quran being recited, a juz' daily. Share with us. Send to the numbers that you see on the screen. If you're in the UK, share with the UK number on WhatsApp. If you're in the US, share with the US number on WhatsApp. And please kindly share a photo, your city, and if you belong to a center or organization, share that with us as well. Thank you so much for tuning in on a nightly basis, brothers and sisters. We look forward to continue to benefit with each other in these nights. Let's keep each other in our prayers, and let's share this link. If you're listening here, share the link with another brother, another sister, and let more and more people benefit, inshallah. Thank you. هذا والحمد لله وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.